Hey guys, it's Danny. Welcome to another Casual Sundays, the show that discusses about orchids rather than shows you a tutorial. So today we're going to discuss about orchids and transport. Transport time and packaging are a really important subject when we are talking about orchids because many of us do order orchids from online stores, online nurseries. So with a few exceptions, we all need to order them from online nurseries specialized in growing a diverse selection of orchids. And so transport can be quite tricky and can make the difference between an orchid which will make it and one that will be lost. And first of all, I would like to show you some orchids that have spent more than a month on transport. In total, I think it's almost a month and a half. So let's see what over a month transport does to an orchid. And here they are. These are a bunch of Camellia seedlings that I just received, which sadly spent over a month on transport. And PS, today is not Sunday, I am pre-recording this, it is the 1st of November today, and they were sent somewhere in the middle of September or the 20th of September or something of the sorts. Now what happened? Why did they spend so much on transport? Well, because apparently they had to go to the United States first before reaching me. They left Germany, and PS, they are from a nursery called MSB, and yes, they have been sent by Jessica from this nursery. So somehow they first went to the USA and then they were shipped back to me. I'm not sure what happened, but glitches of the sorts can happen when you're dealing with transporters. And here they are. This is how they look like after almost a month and a half. It's not a pretty sight, no, and most probably these orchids will need some time to recover. But are they gone? Well, not really, at least not all of them. This, I think, looks the worst, as you can see here. I'm not entirely sure if I can salvage anything because the pseudobulbs are really dark colored and that's not a good sign, but with everybody else, I think I can save them. So the first thing to do is just hydrate them because they didn't receive any water for this long. And after I finish filming this video, that's exactly what I will do. I'm not gonna repot them just yet. My main concern is to get them hydrated, and we'll see further on what to do. So as you can see, they don't look good, but they're not dead. So if you were expecting a bunch of dried leaves, that's not necessarily going to happen with an orchid, of course depending on the variety or of the species. These are Cattleya orchids and supposedly they do tolerate drought better, but they're seedlings, so they actually require more water than a mature orchid. And even so, you can see they're not gone yet. Unlike some other plants, orchids can actually handle very well long transport. Is it ideal? No, but at least you do have a chance to receive a live orchid even after a month and a half. Now let's think about, I don't know, a begonia, maybe a rose bush. Do you think it would survive 1 month and a half in darkness and without any type of water? I don't know if it will. Unless it's a cactus or a succulent, I'm not sure how many other plants would handle the transport so well. But why are orchids special? Why do they handle this transport so incredibly well? And I'm sorry about the light changes, it's kind of cloudy today. Well, because orchids are epyphites. They're not terrestrial plants, they're not aquatic plants, they are epyphites, aka air plants. What does that mean? Well, it means a lot of things. It will take more than a video to make a list of outcomes because orchids are epiphytic, or most of them. However, when it comes to water needs, well, it means orchids are adapted to store water and nutrients and go without it for extended periods of time. And in transport, that's exactly what happens. Therefore, at the end of a long transport, you might have a dehydrated orchid, yes, but not necessarily a gone orchid because she utilized that water from her reserves and maintained itself alive for that period of time. There's another thing that happens in transport, and this is lack of light. So let's go back to other plants right now. Let's think again about the begonias, roses, tulips, I don't know, any type of other plant. You put it in a cupboard without any type of light for a month and it will probably be gone. You put an orchid in a cupboard for a month without light, and to your surprise, if you ever want to do this experiment, I don't suggest you do, but anyway, you'll discover the orchid is fine. It's actually pretty much alive and kicking. How do we explain this? Well, again, orchids are epiphytes. And from that list of outcomes that being an epiphyte induces, let us extract growth rhythm. Orchids are very slow growers for the vast majority of them, and particularly for epiphytes. Why are they so slow growing? Well, easy. Being an air plant means that you will not have access to nutrients and water all that often and in such greater quantities as a terrestrial plant, which has her roots in the soil where everything decomposes. You have that microclimate of bacteria and microbes and all of those things. You have a layer maybe of dead organic material that decomposes and enriches the soil. Everything is pretty much very luxurious in that type of soil compared to bare air, where there's nothing. Therefore, the only way to utilize that lack of nutrients that living in the air gives you is by having a very slow growth rhythm. The amount of foliage and structures an orchid produces annually is generally a lot lower than what a terrestrial plant can produce. Of course, with some exceptions. Let's not necessarily think about trees right now. But compared to other plants similar in size, orchids are just so slow growing. And it's then when you can see the difference between an orchid and a normal plant. Orchids are the way they are because they're very, very well adapted. Now, the fact that orchids are just so well adapted to low light periods and drought periods, well, that's just a really good coincidence for us. However, though, it doesn't mean that transport with orchids is without any type of issues. Orchids do have their sensitivities. So now that we made a sort of general discussion about orchid evolution, let's talk a little bit about the practical side of transporting orchids. Reason number one why orchids might actually perish in transport is moisture. If you put an orchid which has water or moisture trapped inside its structures, it is in great danger of suffering bacterial or fungal infections. And I did have a case of the sorts this summer. You'll see it on the screen right now. This is how my orchid looked like after 1 week on transport, so not even a month. So what happened there was that the orchid was attacked by an infection. When this orchid was sent to me, it looked green, it looked nice, and within a week, it looked like this. And obviously it was not salvageable. That brownness that you see on the leaves, it kept advancing and reaching the axis, so I really couldn't do anything about it. But the explanation is that when you have an orchid in a confined space, such as a box, with moisture that cannot evaporate, well, you have a breeding ground for bacteria and fungi. And the orchid herself is the food source. Therefore, it's the perfect life for these pathogens to develop, and if they have a chance, if they're present through spores or already some bacteria are present, well, they're gonna have a good life and they're gonna decimate the orchid. So rule number one, never ship wet orchids. And by this I mean with wet flowers or wet leaves or pseudobulbs or wet crowns or any external, let's call it external, although it's not really, but any external part of the orchid should be totally impeccably dry. When it comes to roots though, things can be a little different. If the orchid is potted, it can be slightly damp. I think that's the perfect way of transporting orchids, slightly damp. So watering the orchid 2, maybe 3 days before actually shipping it is a good idea, depending of course on the medium and how fast it dries as well. It is always better to treat a dehydrated orchid than an orchid which suffers from an infection, both on the root area and on the external side, pseudobulbs and leaf area. The wetter the orchid is, the more chances it has to arrive in very poor condition. The second thing that can actually damage an orchid on transport is temperature. Very high temperature as well as very low temperature can affect orchids really badly. Cold damage and heat damage can translate in dead tissue when it comes to leaves, and worse when it comes to pseudobulbs or axes or crowns or even roots. When it comes to the flowers, we don't really care. On transport, flowers tend to not do so well anyway, so flower spikes and flowers being damaged on transport, it's not a problem at all, but the core structures of the orchid should be in good condition. Therefore, some nurseries absolutely refuse to ship orchids in wintertime or when temperatures are below 10 degrees Celsius, and that's a good policy. However, some nurseries simply kind of want to sell and don't really care how cold it is outside. Therefore, it is your job to assess the temperature outside and the climate, particularly in the nighttime, because postal warehouses for the main part are not heated. On transport, nurseries can add heat packs. But in my personal opinion, those heat packs don't do all that much. When they arrive to you, they're already cold. Who knows how long they have been cold. Also, some nurseries use polystyrene, and that actually can help, but yet again, they all have a limit. If temperatures outside are just very, very low, best not to order orchids. Wait for springtime or for warmer temperatures. In the summertime, we can talk about the same thing, although milder. If it's very hot outside, you can actually get away with some orchids. Yes, postal offices, or better said, warehouses, don't have air conditioning for the main part. But it is shady. They don't really sit in the sun, the packages. So you do have quite a lot more chances to receive your orchids in good condition. At the same time, depends on the orchid as well. If you have a heat-tolerant orchid on transport, it will last better in high temperatures outside than a cooler growing plant. But ideally, orchids should be transported when things outside are intermediate, such as in springtime and autumn time. If you can, just try to avoid the extremes. And the third thing that can affect an orchid on transport is the way it is packaged. You might know that many nurseries go out of their way to maintain a very fluffy environment around the orchid. Some nurseries use shredded newspapers, others go for packing peanuts, others use sponges, I've seen this as well, and newspaper pages and all of those things. Those are very, very important. Because on transport, postal services are really not careful with how they carry the parcels. And I've seen actually a documentary on it. Parcels are being thrown, they're being banged on each other, other parcels might sit on top of your parcels and all of that. It's a jungle out there. So the way providers pack their orchids is of real importance. The more padding, let's say, you have around the orchid, the better. In many cases, you'll find boxes being very mangled or completely distorted on transport. Some of them even come apart. It's pretty tricky with transport, but the more precaution you take, the better. When it comes to flower spikes, as I was saying, not many survive during transport, but you don't have to necessarily be very sad about it. I will have to say though that Schroeder has the best packaging ever. I've never had broken anything when I ordered from Schroeder, and you know what, I might just start to order once again, take the risks. Transport is a bit long, but hey, I absolutely love how Schroeder packages their orchids. They don't use padding, but they stabilize the orchids on trays, they glue them to the trays, they put stakes so whatever sits on top of a box does not change its shape. I think that all of us here who ordered from Schroeder, for the most part, we can agree it's the best way to transport orchids, but you know, transport price reflects it. So bottom line, if you receive an orchid with a spent or withered or damaged flower spike or buds or flowers, it happens. I don't think it's really easy to prevent that. Nurseries certainly do their best, but you know, I don't think you should expect flowers to really last all that great on transport, unless, you know, you pay more for it because it's in bloom. Otherwise, you know, no big deal. However though, leaves, pseudobulbs, crowns, axes, even roots, they should be in tip-top condition after transport, because those are the most important structures of a plant, of an orchid, not the flower spikes and flowers. Who cares about the flowers? It can rebloom. And with these ideas in mind, orchids can actually last really great on transports. So the moisture levels, the temperature outside, and the way nurseries pack their orchids, all of these contribute to the end result when you receive an orchid. If you yourself want to send an orchid, do keep these 3 things in mind. And also remember that orchids are live things, and even with the amount of precautions we take, you know, I don't think we can guarantee 100% all the time successful transports. And that's something that we need to understand, us as buyers as well. However though, if these 3 things are met, then chances are we're gonna have a good experience with transport or with transporting orchids. So righty guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Being that this is a discussion, I didn't really show you how to package an orchid. I'm not an expert at packaging. I don't sell orchids, and I cannot really talk from the experience of the sender, but I can definitely talk as a customer, as a person just like you who orders orchids and so on. So I hope this discussion was useful, and you know the drill. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye! Well, since the dog is barking and it's annoying, let's make the outro that almost none of you watched. But anyway, did you see Stranger Things this weekend? Actually, the past weekend, because this will be up on Sunday. Oh my goodness, it's the strangest thing. Unintended pun, but sounded good. I'm not gonna give out any spoilers, but I think Stranger Things is one of my absolute favorite TV series. I remember when we first started to watch season 1, we thought, it's okay, it was nice. And then after a few months, we felt the need to watch it again. So we watched season 1 yet again and we thought, oh my goodness, this is actually really good. And then before season 2 came out, we felt the need to watch season 1 yet again. So we did the third time and we thought, oh my goodness, I love this show. I cannot wait for season 2. But we were afraid for season 2 because what if they go all light and childish and all of that? But guess what? It delivered. I loved season 2. My boyfriend said it was better than season 1. I don't know. They're both nice. I like them both equally. They're a little bit different. I love the direction where this TV show is going and hopefully they will maintain it, the darkness and everything. I think it's going up there with Lost. And P.S. Lost is my initial favorite TV series of all time, given Lost has had its downfalls, right? It's not a perfect show. I got a little bit bored at some point, but overall, I really loved Lost because it's up my alley with the genre. Stranger Things, it's going up there with Lost. I did not have this enthusiasm for a TV series since Lost. So there we go. I just need to watch season 2 2 more times before season 3 comes out. So what did you guys think? Did you watch season 2? Did you like it? Let me know in the comments below.